Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to the year 2013. It's Anna. I'm starting to prefer Annie. Either one's really cool. I don't really care anymore. But, anyway, we are starting a new one. Yes, we are. This is the entirety of the Symphony verse, starting with the fic Interludes, all written by Shandyall of LiveJournal. She's really excited for this to get started, and I am too. I love this fic. It's adorable. It gives me a challenge, definitely, because there's a lot of people to do voices for, and there's a lot of stuttering involved. Not going to give too much away. But it should be fun. So, unless you've already read it, you know what I'm talking about. You know what this is all about, and if not, then you will know as the story progresses. So, I hope you guys enjoy it, and yeah. Here is the prologue and first 3 chapters of Interludes by Shandyall. Bye, guys. Interludes, written by Shandyall of livejournal.com. Read to you by Anna Gornflow. Prologue. Kurt is in the basement of the English building when he hears a familiar tune. He knows there's a piano down here, but he's never heard anyone play it before. He follows the tune down a hall and comes to the room that contains the piano. He peers through the window and isn't surprised to see a dark, curly-haired head. Before he can think better of it, he opens the door. "Blaine?" he says with a question in his voice. He's worried how the other boy is going to react. Technically, they don't know each other, but Kurt's been putting together the pieces and they all just fell into place. The other boy stands up so fast he knocks over the piano bench with a clatter. When he turns around, Kurt can tell he scared him out of a deep reverie, but he couldn't pass up the moment. "Hi." Kurt feels ridiculous, but he's going to push through. "I'm Kurt. From online?" Kurt continues, feeling stupid. "From class online, I mean. I wanted to say hi, I guess. I'm sorry to bother you." Blaine just blinks at him, his jaw clenching and unclenching. Kurt thinks he's made a terrible mistake. He's turning away when Blaine finally makes a noise deep in his throat, like he's trying to clear a lump the size of a grapefruit. "How did you know?" Blaine asks, eyes trained to the far corner of the room. "I actually wasn't sure until I just heard someone playing that song and then saw it was you. That's the tuna salad song, right?" Blaine actually snorts a quick laugh at this and flicks his eyes towards Kurt, but all too quickly he frowns. "I didn't want you to know that I stuttered. Kurt can see Blaine's Adam's apple bobbing as he tries to get these words out, to explain to Kurt what happened, why everything seemed to go wrong, just when Kurt thought things were starting to get interesting. Blaine lets out a long, slow breath and starts again. I knew that when I met you, I wouldn't be able to talk, that all my words would get stuck. Blah, blah, oct." Blaine is flushing furiously now, and Kurt can see the slight shake in his hands. "Blocked," Blaine repeats quietly. Kurt is surprised that Blaine stutters, but it doesn't change how he felt about him, how he feels about him. It makes sense, though, why Blaine seemed to reject all of Kurt's ideas to meet up or to talk on the phone or Skype, why he was always so wordless when they encountered each other before the summer. Kurt takes a step towards Blaine and reaches out to put a gentle hand on his shoulder in hopes that Blaine will look up at him. He pulls away when Blaine tenses up at his touch, not wanting to make the other boy more uncomfortable than he already is. Kurt wants Blaine to uncurl and unclench and look up and see Kurt standing before him. Blaine runs his hands through his hair and closes his eyes tightly for a few seconds. But then he does look at Kurt, right into Kurt's eyes. "Sorry," Blaine mumbles. "I didn't mean—" Kurt waits for him to finish, but instead Blaine shakes his head and gestures to his mouth. Kurt wants to tell him that it's okay. He doesn't mind. But he's sure that almost anything he says along the lines of "I don't mind" will be met with disbelief. But he needs to say something, and he needs to say it in a way that doesn't convey pity or discomfort. And he needs to say it in a way that makes Blaine believe that it really doesn't matter to Kurt. I won't think of them as blocks, Blaine. I'll think of them as interludes. Chapter 1. From the beginning, Blaine was well liked by his teachers, but the comments on even his very first kindergarten progress report laid out his issues. Blaine is very well behaved. He follows directions well and is able to print all of his letters and numbers. His fine motor skills are beyond those of many boys his age. I am concerned because of his near refusal to speak to me or the other children. Our speech therapist says he's making some gains in his impediment, but he very rarely says anything in a classroom unless heavily prompted. Blaine couldn't help it. His stutter started pretty much from when he learned to talk. His mom and dad were nice to him about it, usually. Other times he could tell it annoyed them, but mostly it was okay, because they figured he would grow out of it, like his dad did when he was a kid. Sometimes Cooper would be mean to him about it, but sometimes he would act like he didn't even notice. The kids in his neighborhood mostly ignored him. Not that Blaine wanted to talk to them, but sometimes it got boring riding your bike by yourself. When they did talk to him, it was usually just to make fun of him, call him blah, which was the noise he made when he started on his name. He knew they thought he was stupid or retarded or whatever, but he didn't need to be friends with them anyway. His parents sent him to a private speech pathologist, along with a speech therapist at school. His speech pathologist helped him with different techniques. She taught him to soften his stutter and roll into words that he knew he would stutter on. She told him not to try to live his life avoiding words. He didn't think it mattered because he just wanted to make it through the day. As he got older, the comments on his report cards continued the same way. Blaine is well behaved, obviously intelligent, but reluctant to speak. Some teachers made a point of it, saying he was laconic and taciturn, stopping just short of calling him rude or petulant. Mostly, though, he was lucky when it came to teachers. The majority of them were compassionate, letting him give oral reports privately after school, or allowing him to write essays instead of participating in class. There were always a few that would never bend the rules. Those classes were the worst. He would try to talk fast, just to get it over with. He would write his speeches around words that he always blocked on. It never really worked. His face would heat up, and he would hear his classmates tittering at all the things he was saying wrong. His hands would shake, and then his voice would crack, and he would usually just make it through the speech before tears would form in his eyes. During middle school, his speech pathologist had suggested to his parents that maybe Blaine needed a regular therapist. After some discussion, Blaine's parents agreed. Blaine could talk in therapy. He still stuttered, but not as much. He never felt judged. He could just be Blaine, and his therapist, Paula, would laugh at all his jokes or tell him she was proud of him. Blaine relished these little things, even if they embarrassed him. Paula would give him assignments to work on. Usually it was stuff like say something to his parents during dinner. It didn't have to be anything important, just something that happened during the day. Other times it was harder, like answer a question in class. He would always at least try, because sometimes he knew the answer and he wanted so much to just say it and have the teacher smile at him. Paula encouraged him to join an online support group. He was completely opposed to going to one in person, but the online one worked for him. He was actually a really good writer, and when he had the chance to express himself through written word, it felt right. He felt a little of the burden lift every time he would join in the discussion. Things slightly improved in high school. Unfortunately, cruel children have long memories, and any time people were feeling mean, they would call him blah. He would try to laugh it off, because that always seemed to confuse bullies, but it still made him sad. He would get pushed into the bank of lockers, and the guy would all start saying, blah, blah. He wound up crying in a bathroom stall several times during the first few weeks of high school. On the plus side, he had a minor growth spurt and joined the cross-country team. He became friendly with the guys on the team and sat with them at lunch. He mostly got away with nods and shrugs and smiles and one-word answers, all the avoidance techniques that his speech pathologist frowned upon. They didn't seem to mind him hanging around, and he never heard them make fun of his stutter. He could travel as part of a group, and there was safety in numbers. He found joy in music. He started taking piano lessons in 4th grade. It was recommended that he find a creative outlet, and he taught himself the guitar the summer after his freshman year of high school. He could sing without stuttering, and that made it a safe haven. He could spend hours playing songs and making up lyrics and writing music. Blaine found places in his life where things were better than okay, better than just fine. On the miles of cross-country trails, in his room with the music blasting, at the lunch table listening to the other guys chat idly, escaping into a book, talking to Paula, or playing the piano in his sun-drenched living room. These were the places he could be Blaine. He still stuttered all through high school, leaving him a mostly quiet person. He wasn't going to be like his dad. He wasn't going to be one of the lucky ones that just grew out of it. It did get better, or maybe Blaine got better at dealing with it, but it definitely didn't go away. It would always manifest at the very worst times. If his dad was mad at him for not cleaning his room, Blaine would try to apologize or make an excuse, and nothing would come out. And then his dad would be frustrated. Usually he would just yell at Blaine, but sometimes he would hit him, push him, or smack his shoulder. His dad never hurt him or left a bruise on him. Blaine knew his dad couldn't help it, just like Blaine couldn't help his stutter. His dad would always apologize afterward and tell him to work harder. "I know you can get past this, Blaine. I know because I got past it. You just have to try harder." Blaine, for all intents and purposes, was fine, and that's all he really wanted. He got along with his parents, usually. He could rely on Cooper, mostly, and his friends on cross-country accepted him. Thanks to Paula, he could almost always talk when he absolutely needed to, and he had an online support system. He really did love to run, and he loved music even more. Thanks to all these things, and his desperate need to fly low under the radar, Blaine made it through high school in one piece. He graduated with a nearly perfect GPA, glowing recommendations from his most compassionate teachers, and just enough extracurricular activities to give him great options when it came to choosing a college. He was tempted to stay home, commute to a local school, because that would be safe. No roommates to meet or new towns to navigate. But on the other hand, he could start fresh. He has no delusions that he could be a completely new man, but he thinks maybe away from his parents and the kids who have taunted him all these years, that maybe he could finally be Blaine all the time. He could be Blaine outside of running and music. When Blaine gets accepted to NYU, he knows with every fiber of his being that it's the place for him. For the first time in his life, he feels ready to be himself. Chapter 2. On the day Blaine leaves for New York, Cooper, who has come by to see Blaine off, pulls him aside just as Blaine is making his way to the kitchen for a breakfast he doesn't think he can eat. "I wrote you a letter," Cooper says. "A letter?" Blaine asks in wonder. "Yeah, I have some stuff I wanted to say to you, and I wanted to make sure you listened. And I wanted to make sure you would remember it. I would have if you, said it." Blaine thinks of all the words he's let die out and fade away in his life. So many words left unsaid and lingering. "Sometimes, Blaine, people aren't ready to hear the truth. I think you're ready now." Blaine is terrified. He immediately thinks of the terrible or mean or derisive things Cooper could say to him in a letter. What if Cooper was just using the letter to say every mean thing he's thought about Blaine for his whole life? "Don't look so scared. I just had some brotherly advice for you, so I wrote it down, that's all." Blaine decides to save the letter for the plane. He continues on to the kitchen, where his father sits reading the paper. His father is old school like that, reading the financial pages, probably planning investments. Blaine understands that his father cares, but somehow that's very different than believing it. When Blaine sits at the table, his father nods at him. They don't say anything during breakfast, and Blaine is relieved because that means he won't make his father angry or frustrated on his last morning home. When it comes time for Blaine to leave for the airport, his father stands. Blaine can't quite meet his eye. "Blaine, I want you to know that I've placed some more funds into your checking account. You should be fine for money for the semester. Should you need more, email me or call and we'll try to work something out. I know this might not be an easy day for you, and I hope it goes well." Blaine lets out a long, slow breath and says thank you. His father then pulls him into a hug, and Blaine can't help but smile into his father's shoulder. "Be a good boy. Man. Be a good man, Blaine." And with that, his father heads upstairs, while Blaine stands with his mouth agape. Sitting next to his mother on the plane, Blaine tries to soothe himself with a comic book. It doesn't seem to be working. His mother is engrossed in a magazine, so he decides to pull out Cooper's letter. Blaine, I know I've given you a hard time over the years, but that was just brotherly love, I swear. I never meant to be cruel or hurtful or mocking, even though I think you interpreted it that way. I guess I thought I was toughening you up, but that's dumb, because I'm pretty sure you already are tough. Here's some things that I should have been saying to you for the past 18 years instead of what I was saying. You are kind, funny, and smart. You are your own man. I think you're so brave to be going to school in New York. I know this is something we never talk about. I know it's something Mom and Dad don't talk to you about, but it needs to be said. You're more than the way you speak. This is the harshest thing I'm going to say in this letter, but it needs to be said. People have more to worry about than the way you sound. Don't get so down on yourself for stuttering. No one thinks about it except you. Maybe they feel bad for you because they can tell how bad you feel. No one will pity you if you don't pity yourself. I wish I had figured out a way to say this to you when you were younger, and for that, I'm sorry. Anyone that makes fun of you or doesn't let you finish isn't worth your time. Try to have fun in New York. Make friends. Even when you're scared, try to smile at people. A smile goes a long way, Blaine. Be yourself. Call me if you need me. And if anyone is mean to you, screw 'em. Love, Coop. The second Blaine can, he shoots Cooper a text message. Thank you, Cooper. A minute later, his phone buzzes. Don't let the haters get you down, B. Blaine barks out a laugh and almost doesn't care when his fellow passengers look at him strangely. He takes his brother's advice to heart. It doesn't make him a completely different person. He'll never be a big chatter or a particularly loud person. Even if he didn't stutter, he'd probably be on the reserved side. But he's going to try his damnedest to have an actual college experience. He's going to work hard not to hide behind his stutter and his shyness, to make friends, and to be Blaine for once in his short life. He knows that the first obstacle to everything he wants is saying his name. It always comes down to that when meeting new people. He makes a terrible first impression. There's always an awkward pause when people ask him his name or at the moment when he should introduce himself. He always worries that people assume he forgets his name. He and Paula had spent a lot of their sessions over the summer coming up with techniques to help him with his name issues. He never wants to be blah again, so he worked on focusing on the B instead of the bull. He rarely gets through it without a block, but it's a quieter buzz of a block rather than an explosive blah sound. So many people take saying their own name for granted. He's thinking about all this as he and his mom make their way to baggage claim and out into the pickup area. Blaine was relieved that his mom had decided to join him on this trip. He was so nervous, it helped that right now he could be more passive and let her handle the hard stuff, like hailing a cab and instructing the driver. "You doing okay, bud?" she asks as they sit in traffic. Blaine wants to just nod, but that's no way to start this adventure he's chosen. That's what the old Blaine would have done. College Blaine needs to be ready to talk. I've been better." Blaine usually avoids B words like the plague, but he's trying to confront them head on. It's sort of a superstition he's developed, as if maybe allowing himself to stutter on hundreds of other B words, maybe he'll be able to say his name when the time comes. For the first time he can remember since being a little boy crossing the street, his mom takes his hand and gives it a solid squeeze. "You chose this, Blaine," she says, not in a scolding way, but in a way to remind him. "You own your choice. You don't have to be here, and no one will think any less of you if it doesn't work out. I don't know what Cooper said in his letter, but I want to say that you need to try." This time, Blaine does let himself just nod, because he really doesn't trust his voice. He can't even meet his mother's eyes. He tries so much all the time. He tries every day, and somehow his mother never sees. All of his trying is never enough. Maybe someday he'll tell her, but not today. He needs to save his words for other people today. "Take it day by day," his mom continues, "and then week by week. I know you can do this, Blaine, and I'm very proud of you." His head whips up in surprise. He didn't expect her to conclude with that. He's not sure his mom has ever said those words to him, and they act like a salve on his soul. He smiles then, right at her, looking her in the eye, realizing that he's going to do this. that he can do this. His mom knows he can. In a day full of surprises, his mother's words might be the best one. Of course, things don't ever really go perfectly. When they arrive at his dorm, the first person they run into is his resident advisor. Blaine is all set to introduce himself to get past that first obstacle. And then his mom totally steals his thunder. "This is Blaine," she says, turning toward him with a smile, as if Blaine should be excited that his mom thinks he can't speak for himself. He just sighs and smiles, but what he really wants to say is, "What the hell, Mother? Why would you take my moment?" But of course, the nervous loser side of his brain is totally relieved that he can put off the name torture. His RA's name is Christy, and she seems nice enough, though definitely harried at the moment. She directs him to his room, and she's on to the next task at hand. He and his mother make his way to his dorm room amid the hustle and bustle of students and parents. She helps him settle in a bit, making his bed, hanging up clothes. There will be a box delivered in the next few days with more of his belongings, but for now he just has what they could take on the plane. A few suitcases and his guitar. Blaine doesn't mind. He doesn't really need much to get by. His mother leaves to check into her hotel and freshen up, leaving Blaine to rearrange his drawers and to decide where to store his suitcases. He props his guitar case in the corner for now, thinking he's going to need a stand. His mom will be back later to take him for dinner and say goodbye, so maybe they could do some quick shopping too. Blaine is roused from his thoughts when there's a commotion in the doorway. A tall, lean, brown-haired boy enters, followed by not just a mother and a father, but a small entourage of their other brown-haired children. It's a ruckus. Blaine is terrified of ruckuses in general. He shrinks in on himself for a moment before he remembers he's going to try. He pulls himself up to his full height and smiles. "Hey, what's up, man? I'm Matt," says Blaine's apparent roommate. "I'm gonna guess you're Blaine?" "What is this magic? Why is everyone taking this away from him?" Again, Blaine wishes that his first feeling isn't relief, but it is. "Yeah, that's me," Blaine responds sheepishly. "Awesome. This is my family. I don't know why they're so noisy right now." Matt's grinning at his entourage that has already started taking over the room. Blaine immediately notices the guitar case slung over Matt's back, and it puts him at ease. Matt's family starts the usual round of handshaking and introductions, and Blaine is actually feeling okay. He's stumbling, blocking a bit, but no one seems to be paying much attention to it. He knows his face is red, but it feels more like he's glowing, rather than embarrassed. It feels like a blush of happiness rather than humiliation. It's new, and Blaine likes it. Much later that night, after dinner and saying goodbye to his mom, after a hall meeting where Chrissy the RA laid out the plans for tomorrow, after hanging out with Matt and a few other people in their dorm, Blaine is tucked into his new bed. He's tucked in between new sheets, and he's thinking of all the things that surprised him today, including himself. He's never thought much about how people perceive him. He only assumed that people didn't care or wouldn't like him, or couldn't be bothered to listen to him. When he woke up this morning, he never would have imagined that Cooper would call him brave, that his father would give him a hug, or that his mother would say she's proud of him. But that all happened today. He knew he was going to have to deal with blocks and the embarrassment of talking to new people, but he never would have guessed that it wouldn't be terrible, that it wouldn't be impossible. He smiles to himself in the dark. Tomorrow is going to be even better. Chapter 3. Blaine uses his guitar as a shield for the first few weeks of college. When he's uncomfortable in a social situation in the dorm, he'll go get his guitar and play quietly. It gives him something to do with his hands and somewhere to look besides people's eyes. He doesn't sing or anything, but just sort of plays and listens to people. People actually seem to like it. People seem to actually like Blaine. He's shocked as he finds out that simply by being roommates with Matt, he's making friends. Although more shocking is that it seems that Blaine is making friends even when Matt's not around. He and Matt jam together in their room a lot. They bond pretty quickly over their love of music. They both have a quirky affinity for singing about what they're doing at the time. So they make up songs about the other kids in their dorm or the English paper they should be writing. They have a whole song worked out about this tuna salad sandwich that lives in their mini fridge and how, even though it's old and kind of smelly, it's in a fairly loving relationship with the pack of batteries that also live in the fridge. It's a ballad written in B-flat minor, or what Matt calls Blaine's favorite chord. Every time you write a song, it sounds like a fucking funeral dirge, man, Matt says to him one day. I like sad songs, and of course the tuna salad is sad. It smells like ass and doesn't have any friends, Blaine says, falling into their usual banter. But he still avoids B words when he can help it. But it isn't a loving relationship with the batteries, Matt responds. It is, but sometimes love just ain't enough, Blaine exclaims while strumming the chords to the Patti Smith song. This then turns into a song about the bottle of vodka that Matt has in the freezer, because that's how these things happen with Matt and Blaine. Blaine's never had a friend like Matt. He almost doesn't understand it at first, making up inside jokes and laughing and talking and not worrying about his stutter. Blaine actually told Matt about his fear of saying his first name, and Matt doesn't act like it's weird in the least. After his confession, whenever Matt's around for introductions, he'll give Blaine a glance, and if Blaine shakes his head, Matt will introduce him. Sometimes he'll make a name up, and Blaine has to jump in and correct him, but by that point he's laughing so much that no one notices if he stutters or not. He's shocked by how much Matt seems to like him. Matt always makes sure Blaine is included. He always asks him to go along to dinner, and he makes a point of hanging out with Blaine even outside of their room. During the first couple of months, Blaine worries that Matt thinks he's a charity case. It's not until late October that Blaine realizes that Matt is a much better person than he ever could have guessed. It was late, or early, depending on how you looked at it. Though somehow, during college, everyone becomes mildly nocturnal, it seems. Blaine? Came the sound of Matt's voice from across the room. Yeah? I want to ask you something, and I don't want you to get mad or anything. Okay. Blaine was suddenly too nervous to say much more. Are you gay? Blaine's not sure what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. He's taken aback, but he knows the answer, and has for a while. He just spent so much of his life dealing with other shit that who he was attracted to was never really an issue. In high school, sometimes he was attracted to girls, and sometimes he was attracted to guys. Lately, it's been mostly guys. But because his voice always leaves him high and dry when he needs it the most, he doesn't have any misconceptions about being in a relationship, at least not right now. As soon as he realizes he likes someone, his jaw clamps together. You don't have to tell me, Matt is saying as Blaine tunes back into the conversation and out of the deep recesses of his mind. No. Blaine shakes his head in the dark, knowing Matt can't see it. It's not that I don't want to tell you. I just never told anyone. And then quietly, almost reverently, Blaine says, Yes? A whoop comes from the other side of the room. Thank God! That means that even though Jillian is all up on your junk all the time, I still have a chance with her. Blaine sits up and looks over at Matt, who is actually fist-pumping in his bed. Seriously? You're not freaked out? Blaine asks. Seriously, man, it's not a big deal. I have a gay uncle. A gunkle, if you will. The conversation meanders from there. There's something about the darkness and a kind ear that makes Blaine want to talk. So he does, with Matt interjecting and laughing and being Matt. Somewhere along the line, they both finally fall asleep as the sun is rising. But it's one of the best conversations Blaine has ever had with anyone in his whole life. When Matt first approaches him with the idea of playing open mic nights, Blaine flat out refuses. He can't imagine performing in front of people. Listen, B. He's not sure when Matt started calling him B, but he likes it. It reminds him of Cooper. I know you're like shy and nervous or whatever, but you wouldn't even have to talk. You could just play the guitar. It would be so much more fun this way. We sound so damn good. Just think about it. And Blaine does think about it. Because Matt is his friend and his roommate, and they do get a ton of compliments when they play together. But he's so nervous about the whole idea. There's so many ways that things could fall apart for Blaine when he's in front of a crowd. So many ways that Blaine could fall apart in front of a crowd. Blaine relents to Matt's idea of open mic nights after just a few days. He's scared as hell of being in front of any type of crowd, but he'll have his guitar and Matt there. Matt says he's played a couple of coffee houses before, and Blaine won't have to say a word if he doesn't want to. Matt does apparently want him to harmonize and sing backup, which Blaine doesn't really mind, because he loves music, and he loves singing, and he loves his roommate. Matt does so much for Blaine that Blaine knows he can't actually say no to this request. The first night they play at a little coffee house a few blocks away from their dorm. Blaine is a bundle of nerves. November is settling in on the city, with the days just barely warm and the nights downright cold. It's a relief to get inside after their short walk, and Blaine thinks that he'd love a nice warm coffee. He observes the scene, though, while he and Matt store their gear. Blaine doesn't order coffee anywhere they ask for a name. It's too much pressure for just a drink. It's one of those things that he lets himself off the hook for when it comes to his stutter these days. There are plenty of places to get coffee that don't require you to have a name, and those are the places that Blaine frequents. Sadly, this is not one of those stutter-friendly coffee joints. As he's thinking all this, a boy walks through the door. A boy too pretty to be called handsome, too tall to be called elfin, even though there's something ethereal about him. He looks around the tables, and his glance falls on Blaine. Blaine leans over his guitar, pretending to tune it, rather than look this beautiful boy in the eye. A moment of Kurt. Kurt had been running around like an asshole all day, and he hates being an asshole. It was completely his fault. He left his apartment just before noon and forgot his wallet. When he got back to his apartment, he realized that he locked himself out. He banged on the door, waiting for Rachel to get out of bed at the crack of noon to let him in, and then he remembered that she was working. This meant he had to run down to the coffee place and get her key, and so on and so forth. His day just continued to suck from there. After several classes and a really annoying meeting with his advisor, Kurt was back at the same coffee place he'd retrieved Rachel's keys from 9 hours earlier. He just wanted to get a latte and slump in a chair and zone out for a while. He looked around as he walked through the door, hoping that no one he knew was there, because really he just needed this time for himself. As he glanced towards the back of the shop, he saw the assistant manager setting up open mic night. "This is good," Kurt thought to himself. "I can get behind listening to the acoustic stylings of random strangers as long as they don't suck." He then caught sight of a boy about his age with short, curly, dark brown hair. He couldn't tell what color eyes he had, because the second the boy caught sight of Kurt, he averted his gaze to his guitar. Again, Kurt just hoped that he didn't suck. The manager announced that the music would begin in a few minutes. Another boy took the stage, introduced himself as Matt, and then turned to the curly-haired boy. Kurt saw now that the boy had hazel eyes, quiet eyes that didn't seem to want to focus on much of anything at the moment. He shook his head quickly at Matt. Matt grinned at him and then said to the crowd, "And this is my buddy, B-flat." The other boy couldn't contain a laugh after Matt said that. Kurt liked them already. They started playing right after that, mostly top 40 stuff, some classic rock. They were almost exactly what Kurt needed after the day he had. They were soothing and not too loud and just seemed really into the music. Near the end of their set, they played a silly yet somehow plaintive song about tuna salad. Kurt hated to admit it, but he just knew it was going to be stuck in his head for the next 3 days. Kurt bumps into the curly-haired boy coming out of the men's room after the set ends. Kurt smiles at him and tells him that he really liked their music, particularly the tuna ballad. The other boy just blushes and nods and flees the tiny corridor. "Cute ass," Kurt thinks as he watches him retreat. Blaine's hands tremble through the first 2 songs, making him feel like he's not going to be able to do this. But once he finds his groove and starts singing and stops thinking about the people looking at him, he's happy. Like really, really adrenaline rush happy. At the very end of their set, when Matt starts playing the opening of the tuna salad song, Blaine isn't sure whether to punch him or laugh. He decides to just go with it and is surprised when he hears chuckles from the 20 or so people in the audience. As the song winds down, Matt thanks the people watching for their time, and they start to put away their gear. Matt offers to buy Blaine a coffee, by this point realizing why Blaine hasn't gotten one in the first place. Blaine could really use a drink, so Matt goes to put in their order, and Blaine runs to the bathroom to splash some water on his flushed face. He takes a quick glance around the shop and notices that the gorgeous boy from earlier is slumped in a chair, reading a magazine. Blaine thinks if he were a different kind of guy, he'd go over to him and say something witty, but that's not in the cards for him tonight. Blaine is coming out of the bathroom when suddenly this tall, beautiful figure is right in front of him, saying words to him. He liked the songs? The tuna ballad? This makes no sense. Blaine knows he should thank him and say words too, but what words? There are no words for this moment. So instead he blushes and nods and runs away, terrified. But he can't help but smile to himself. He should have smiled at the gorgeous boy. Next time, he promises himself, thinking of Cooper's letter. He'll smile next time, and feel the warmth spread through him of being attracted to a guy. He finds Matt and ushers him out of the shop into a blustery November chill, where he tells him about his terrifying encounter and his shiny, brand-new crush.